Hey everyone, I'm Kloo, and I've come up with a super simple way to make items affect an entity's attributes. So for instance, if we drop this slime ball onto the villager, you can see he now has a particle effect. We go ahead and grab his data. We can notice two things. So first off, he has a tag called buff, and now he actually has a new attribute also called buff that's affecting his armor and giving it a value of 1. So this villager has a little bit extra armor. He's still pretty simple to kill. So how's it done? Roll very simply with 4 command blocks. The first command we're using is this execute at type equals item run tag. So we're looking for any item on the ground, so that's why we're specifying type item, and then we're detecting the closest entity that is not an item and not a player within a distance of 1 and limiting it to 1. That way, any dropped item doesn't just give every entity in the world a buff. So we're tagging that entity, we're calling it buff. The next step is to detect the tagged entity, so execute at entity who has a tag equals buff, and we're going to kill the item dropped on them. That way we can't reuse the item. After that, we're running a particle effect, so again we're executing at any entity that has that tag buff, and we're running the particle. I'm using crit, specifying the coordinates, the size, speed, and the particle count. So for anyone who hasn't used the particle command, first you have to select a particle. It's very simple. If you just type in Minecraft, you have a drop-down list to pick from. Then you need to specify coordinates. Now we're using the execute at, so we can use this little squiggly line. You'll find it's tilde. You'll find it on your keyboard, usually on the top left-hand corner. And this will make it dynamic and always use the coordinates of the entity. I'm pushing it up half a block because this is generally the middle of the majority of entities' models, because all their hitboxes start at the bottom or their feet. Then we have to specify a size, so it's going 0.2 blocks in each direction around the entity. We're slowing down the particle effects. I find it's best to always slow them down. For whatever reason, the majority of particles, their animation base is a lot quicker than what they're used in game. And then we're only using a particle count of 1 because the command block is running every tick. Next up, we have to actually affect the attribute. So we're using the attribute command, and again, we're looking for an entity that's been tagged buff. We're limiting it to 1. This is very important. You have to limit it to 1, otherwise the attribute command won't work. And to get around it, we use sort random. So this will automatically check one entity every tick, and therefore eventually, and really quickly, get to the entity that has been tagged buff. So after that, we have to specify the attribute to modify. So again, there's a drop-down list. If you type in Minecraft ... I've selected armor, then the modifier. So there's 2 different ones you can pick from. There's get and there's base. You want to use modifier so you can actually add, change, or multiply the value. So modifier, add, then you have to specify what's known as a UUID. This is just a random string of numbers that essentially differentiates this attribute from everything else. I find it's very easy just to count, so 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. You need at least 5 digits hyphened, and this way you have 99,999 different combinations you can use. After that, you need to name the attribute, so I'm just calling it buff in line with the tag. You'd obviously want to use something more specific if you're going to use a whole array of these. So for instance, you might call it modify armor. Then you need to specify value, and then you need to specify a clause. So this last one, you have 3 options: add, multiply, multiply base. So add will just add 1 to the attribute. Multiply will multiply it by 1, or in this case 100%, so it'll double it effectively. Multiply base will only modify their base attributes. So this stops any compounding effect from giving the entity multiple attributes. So it's most cases you'll just want to use add or multiply if you want to give a slight increase or if you want to give a specific increase. So for instance, if you think about speed, you have something like zombies and wolves. Wolves are slightly quicker, so if you use multiply, the wolves will get a bigger buff than zombies. So this is the basic structure of the system, but we can begin to customize a bit further. So by going back to our first command block, execute at entity type equals item, we can type in NBT data equals 2 curly brackets. So by using the NBD data, we can now select for specific items using item ID and things like names on the item. So inside this little bracket, we're going to type in item with a capital and 2 curly brackets. This is the basic structure of an item dropped on the ground. So inside here, we can now specify the item ID by typing in ID and quotation marks. So inside here, you'd want to type in Minecraft and then specify the ID of the item. So for instance, we're using slime balls, so slime underscore ball, no capitalization. And what this means is now only slime balls will actually give the entity a buff. So for instance, if we drop any other block, it no longer works. We have to drop specifically our slime balls. Building off of that, we can now specify things like a name. So if you type in tag, followed by some more curly brackets, and then display, again, curly brackets. So inside here, we're going to capitalize name, some more curly brackets. So now inside here, we can specify the text on the item and give it a name. So for instance, slime balls will no longer work unless they are called armor, since we're affecting the armor attribute. Even if I drop a slime ball onto an entity, it no longer gets deleted, the entity does not get buffed. If we go ahead and rename it in an anvil, it now works again. This gates the items you can use and allows you to create multiple items. So for instance, the main one I was using was Dragon's Breath with different names and different lore tags. So for instance, you can make them all slime balls and specify the different names. So armor, attack, speed to affect all the different attributes. All you have to do is copy over this structure and repeat it for each different attribute you want to modify. Of course, we can also obviously change the particles. We can use flame. And we can also change things like the attribute. So instead of generic armor, we could use movement speed. We could increase the value, change the multiplier. So now it's effectively giving 200% of the entity's speed back to the entity. And of course, we can give it a better name. So we'll call this one speed. You can see their particle has changed, and they should be fairly quick. Yep, all zipping around. That's pretty much the system. The easiest way to obviously remove the attribute is to reverse it. So instead of attribute, blah, 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 add, you could change it to remove. And you could also specify a different tag along with a different item. I'll set up quickly just to show it off. Right, so I've set up essentially the same system, and of course no particle effect because we're removing it. And then for the attribute, we're using attribute, tag, remove, same selection parameters. We're selecting the movement speed, but instead of doing add, we're doing remove, and you do have to specify the UUID you set up. And then of course we're cleaning up the tags just to make sure it's all gone. So we go ahead and rename the slime ball to remove, switch on our commands, so they're all turned on. We can go ahead and remove his buffs. The particle stops, and his attributes should also be gone. We'll just double check. Yep, so he has no tags. He still has the armor attribute because we only removed the speed, but he is no longer quick. We can find our speedy guy. Yep, we can go ahead and slow him down too. Whoop. Back to normal. Pretty simple. Hope it helps.